So Tiff called me up and she said, because of course she has to do this out of work because we don't actually have time to talk about this stuff in the office. So she calls me at home one night and said, so I just want to hear a little bit about your kind of story and what you're going to say. And so we started to talk and I said, well, I never really planned on getting to the top. I didn't have that, like, I want to be head of planning, I want to be running an advertising agency, I want to start my own company. I never really had those things planned out. So she said, well, how do you think that stuff happened? And I thought about it, and a lot of people have said to me, well, you're kind of lucky. I don't think I was lucky, actually. I think that I was born into the right family at the right time. So what I realized about myself is that I've always been in charge. And I really like it. I was the first child, and I have 112 first cousins. So I was the first child in a very, very large Irish family. My mother was one of 14, my father was one of 12. Their brothers and sisters had enormous amounts of children. My mother was a real slacker, she just had 3. But I was the first born into that family, and it was a very matriarchal family. Women really kind of ruled the roost. My grandmother was awesome. I mean, she had 14, she had 16 children, 2 of them died. So she was pregnant most of her life, but she was the funniest, smartest person that I knew. And she completely worshipped me. And from a very early age told me that I really actually just needed to be in charge. That's how it was going to be. And the fact that I was the oldest child meant that I actually was in charge, because I had to take care of everybody else's kids. Because some of my mother's brothers and sisters were having children when, frankly, they were children. So from a very early age, I was like in charge of this kind of huge family and used to kind of making decisions and deciding what everybody should do. And my first day at school, in fact, I was telling Tiffany, I've forgotten about this story. I was 5, and in England, you can't start, at that time, you couldn't start school until you were 5. My birthday is in December, and the school year starts in September, so I didn't start till January. And I walked into this class of 30 kids, none of whom I knew. And again, I was used to kind of being in charge. And I looked around and thought, now what am I going to do? So I gathered all the toys and put them on my desk, and then kind of handed them out gradually. And it was like, so a complete control freak, I admit it, and very, very bossy. And I want to just talk about the word bossy because it was actually something that was celebrated about me in my family, but it's not something, I think, that is celebrated in the world. And someone said to me that most boys after the age of 4 never get referred to as bossy. It's always girls who are bossy. And it's a way, I think, to like keep us in our place. Anyway, I love being bossy. And
she does. She does.
And I think it's really important that kind of, we all just kind of lean into that and own it. It's about taking charge. It's about making decisions. It's about creating something that people can follow. And we shouldn't be ashamed of it. So I say we all embrace that word bossy and kind of make it fabulous again. And I was always asked my opinion on everything. So I have never had, and most people who know me, any problem expressing my opinion about anything. I have a definite point of view about things. I'm quite willing to go to the wall for that point of view if necessary. I'm also willing to be wrong about that. But I've always had a strong opinion. And I always assumed that people actually wanted to hear that. And I found that I was right half the time. So some people found it really refreshing that I had a point of view and an opinion, and even from a very young age was able to kind of express that. And I think the other half of the people thought, who the hell does she think she is? Especially in the UK, where I think it was very much, you don't really speak until you're spoken to. Women in particular should kind of know their place. But the people who thought it were refreshing, and I have to say a lot of them were men, were usually in more kind of senior positions. And I think as a result of that, kind of took notice without me kind of really realizing it or recognizing it. So having a definite point of view, expressing that point of view, being open to others and listening, of course, is kind of critical, but don't be frightened to tell people how you think and why you think that way. Because, that's really what people are looking for when you come to work, I imagine, every day. And then the third thing is I managed to find places to work where people actually loved and appreciated that. So I worked in fabulous cultures. So my first job in the States was at Chiat Day. I was 10 when I started there. So it was like the late 80s, early 90s, and it was on fire. I would argue that it was the kind of Crispin Porter of its day, doing fabulous work. It was like the number, I think it was like it was Agency of the Decade. It had like 7 of the top television ads, which really kind of were the primary medium then of the decade. There were fabulous people working there, all of whom have now actually gone on to run their own companies and agencies. So it's a fantastic culture. And Jane Newman, who is also a planner, was running the agency in New York. So I, from a very early age, had a mentor who was a woman. And, I learned huge amounts from being part of that place. And I think actually a lot like Crispin, it was very much a meritocracy. The work was all that really mattered. So it didn't matter if your strategy was awesome. If it didn't translate into good work and the creative people didn't know what to do with it, then it was not worth thinking about or talking about. Everybody was accountable, whether you were an account person or the creative person or the planner, for that work, and was held accountable for that. There was no, everyone got their own mail, got their own coffee. It was a very kind of egalitarian, well, it's not really egalitarian, it was more of a meritocracy, I think. And, we worked really hard. Shy it day and night, all of those things were absolutely true. If you don't come in Saturday, don't bother coming in Sunday. I mean, again, one of those cultures. But it was fantastic, and it was probably the best experience I ever had. It was certainly a great foundation for me. And when I, think about other companies that I've gone on to work at and run, and my own company, for me, having a culture and a clear point of view about what's expected is kind of fundamental, I think, to success. And because of how I'd grown up, I took responsibility for everything. So I actually thought I was responsible for the entire project. Even if I was a planner, I worried very much about what the actual outcome was going to be. I was accountable to my clients, I was accountable to the people I work with, I was accountable to the people I work for. So I kind of always owned it. And people were really happy for me to do that. But when I got promoted, people got pissed off. It was like, well, you should be doing all the work and be accountable for it all, but actually, why are you getting asked to be the president of the company, or why have you been promoted to be the head planner? And it was usually men so they were quite happy for me to do all the work. They weren't particularly happy for me to get any of the credit for any of that stuff. And that was actually a really hard thing. It was really, really hard because I really liked these people. I trusted them, I worked with them, and I realized they resented me. And that's when Jane said, Rosemarie, it's more important to be respected than liked. And there are going to be times in your life when people who you think are your peers and your colleagues are actually not interested in kind of your best interests, and you're going to have to just get over it and get over yourself. So that was the kind of, I think, hardest lesson. A lot of the kind of cliches that hopefully not too many of you experience now, I experienced. So there were all these rumors that I was, I'd slept my way to the top. The good news, it was apparently with Jane Newman and with John Bond. So it's got equal opportunities. Flexible, yeah, very flexible. I love Jane, but I don't kind of love her in that way. And I have a huge amount of respect for John, but he's got a 3-second attention span, so that wouldn't be much fun. So I promise you, I wasn't kind of sleeping with any of those, but those are the kind of rumors. When I was made president of Kirshner Malm Bond, and again, that wasn't something I asked for. They came to me and said, in fact, I'd left to be head of, talking about not asking, I hadn't really asked to run the company, although I felt for a while that that's really what I was doing. And I went to become head of planning at another agency, and Richard and John called me back about a year later and said, hey, listen, we really need a president. We really need someone to help us run this place. And I thought they were going to ask me for my opinion on who that might be. And then they said, so we think maybe you might be that person. And I was really shocked. It took me probably 2 months to decide that was actually what I wanted to do, because I'd never run a P&L in my life. I'd run brands, but I'd never run a business. And then I realized that actually what an organization is a brand. And if you use the same principles to do that and learn how to look at a spreadsheet and a P&L, you're in pretty good shape. I also get bored, I think, probably very easily. And I need new challenges, and I need to be stretched. So I was at Kirschenbaum for about 10 years. Bob Jeffrey asked me to come over to JWT, and I was thinking, I've never worked in a corporation in my entire career. I've never worked for a holding company. JWT feels to me like it's from a different century or world. I'm not sure kind of what I can achieve there. But Bob was, again, someone that I'd known from the Shy It Day days. And, we had similar values, similar belief about kind of where the business needed to go. And so I joined as president of the New York office. And it was the hardest thing I think I've ever done. I will tell you that I had no idea how hard it was going to be. For the first 6 months, I don't even remember my kind of feet touching the ground. And you just realize that actually this was a company that was probably 20 years behind the time. I mean, some awesome people working there, by the way, and some pockets of really great work. But in general, it was a company that was definitely stuck in the past. And I had to find a way to kind of, bring it into the future. And someone said to me, the thing about leaders, Rosemarie, is they have followers. And I recognize that having a really good point of view and a clear point of view about what the vision for the company was and what kind of company we wanted to be in the culture was critical, but I had to bring a lot of people along with me, some of whom didn't share those values or those beliefs. But if they had decided they were going to kind of give up and jump out off the ship as I was trying to turn it around, it probably would have sunk. So I had to find a way to like move people forward, to be right without making everybody wrong. And you know, at Kirschenbaum and at Chiat Day, being right was all that really mattered. And if you didn't like it, then whether you worked there or you were a client, then you could probably go somewhere else. At JWT, it was a very different kind of world. And it was patience. It was a very difficult thing, a very hard thing for me, but a huge, I think, and a very important lesson. And I think some of my best work, actually. But I got to the point where I was like, well, I really like to be in charge. And ultimately, Martin Sorrell's in charge. Is he listening? He's probably got a number of cameras and things in here. And you know,
right now.
Alarms just went off somewhere.
And as much as Bob had a great vision that we shared for the company, I wasn't sure that was Martin's vision. And I really couldn't belong to something that I kind of didn't believe in that regard. I cared too much about the people, about the place, about the clients, about the brands. So I decided that rather than just kind of get angry about it, I should go off and start my own thing, which I did. And I'm very happy. And as Anne said, it's the best experience I've ever had. It is exhilarating and terrifying at the same time, but I guess I kind of like that. But it was interesting because when I was leaving, Martin had thought I'd lost my mind and actually told me that I should go away for a week on holiday because I was tired. I'm like, Martin,
you were PMSing
really
probably.
I'm making this decision because I'm tired? Yes, I am, but that's not the reason why I'm making the decision. And he just fundamentally couldn't understand why I was leaving, because we'd had, again, huge amounts of success. Everybody was happy with the performance, including him. And and I think for him, he felt like it was a betrayal. So that was leaving Bob was actually really hard. Leaving Martin wasn't so hard. But I realized that I had to actually just jump out and do it for myself. And it was more terrifying than exhilarating for the first 3 months. I didn't have a nervous breakdown, but as Emma and Anne know, who we would go out for regular drinks.
Is that your posse?
They're my posse. They were like, so how is it? I'm like, I feel ill. I'm so terrified. And I don't know what I was scared of, I guess. The unknown. But I recognize that I think, you've got to be comfortable being uncomfortable in this kind of world if you want to succeed. And I think the world's changing so fast that that's the only way to be and succeed. Anyway, I'm going to stop talking now. But that's my story.
Thanks, Rose.